because this might be the inner chronicle of what we are, and we have to articulate ourselves, otherwise we would be cows in a field.
Welcome to Cows in the Field. This is a show in which we discuss philosophical themes in popular films. My name is Justin.
I'm Laura.
And today we're calling in the Cobra. That is Phil Gawthorne of Die Hard on a Blank to talk about the film Cobra.
Society is breeding a new kind of criminal. It's also breeding a new kind of cop.
All along you knew it wasn't right. You were spending time losing.
Welcome to the show, Phil.
Thank you so much, guys. I'm so happy that you said that. I was hoping, I thought I might have to twist your arm to get you to say that, but I
You
was
don't have to
thrilled.
twist his arm for him to say anything goofy at the top.
I've always wanted to be that.
be the Cobra.
Like, I want to be in people's phone, in their contact lists as Cobra. So at some point they can say, call the Cobra.
It's
Call the
that
Cobra.
point of the night. We got to call the Cobra. All other solutions are out the window.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's a
we gotta
guy.
escalate. We
The
gotta
chips
escalate
are
this one.
down. Yeah.
There's a dude in the
Exactly.
supermarket. We got to call in Phil.
I think we're going to have to
Amazing.
talk about that supermarket scene for
Sure.
a couple of
Okay.
beats.
Yeah. All right, Phil. So we know you're a big fan of the film because when we gave you, initially we were going to do Mannequin, but then when we had Liam on, he was like, I don't know, we were talking about Demolition Man, I guess, and we were like, some other Sly films, and Liam was like, do you know that Phil is a huge fan of Cobra? And I was like, okay, let's offer that to Phil. And you were, I think you replied in 5 minutes.
Oh yeah. I mean, once you call the Cobra, like you have to show up in a car from the 50s with the license plate Awesome 50.
Yeah.
And when you get the call, you got to answer. So
That's
of
right.
course, I was
Yeah.
knocking down the door the second that was even mooted.
And I will say that, so your show, Die Hard on a Blank, you're covering the films that are inspired by Die Hard. This movie
Yes.
comes before Die Hard. So
Yes.
does not fall within the purview of your podcast. So an exciting opportunity for you to talk about a film you love that you can't do necessarily on your podcast.
Exactly.
So tell us a little bit about what about Cobra makes you coming back for more.
It's kind of like it's an abusive relationship I have with this film, of which I am the abused. This film is like indefensible on so many levels. Its politics are abhorrent. Its logic is virtually non-existent. Nothing that happens makes any sense. It's totally unrealistic. It's egomania writ large and bottled forever. And I fucking love it, man. The big thing I would say about it, why I love it, it's the vibes.
Good vibes.
It's a vibes movie.
Yep.
And I was listening to there is a commentary track.
Oh, wow.
With the director, George P. Cosmatos. And it was quite revealing with it. I won't bore you with all the details, but just literally the first 30 seconds told me everything I need to know. And he's like this, and he just goes, here's the opening titles, dark, mysterious. And I was like, got it. He's a vibes director. He's not like, so this is the opening scene where we meet the cultist and they have this sort of Darwinian social worldview. And then we're going to sort of set up and it's Venice and it's just like, it's vibes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The whole movie.
Yeah.
And I have to say, like, this film is so committed to its aesthetic.
Yeah.
And the aesthetic is so cool. The film is so stylish.
Yeah.
That everything else, not only is it like forgivable, but it also becomes part of the stew because the main ingredient for me is the vibes, and it's the vibes that I love.
That's a great way to pitch this movie to someone.
Yeah.
Because
That makes sense because he's like, nobody would really just like hit axes in the air a bunch of times because it seems tiring and pointless, but it's really cool on screen.
yeah, we come back to those axe clackers a lot.
Axe clackers.
For sure. Yeah. Clank some axes in a swimming pool. You'll see me doing it every Friday night, like with my homies. Why not? It's good for the arms, right?
That's yeah.
It's true. It's
You
a
know?
workout.
It's arm
Yeah,
day.
it's a workout.
Yeah.
Yeah. The glutes going.
I mean, now we have axe throwing. Back then in the 80s, we had axe clanking.
Axe clanking. Yeah.
So when is the show Miami Vice on the air? Because this feels like it's like vibing in the same sort of spirit as Miami Vice.
I believe Miami Vice is like 84.
Okay, so it's right around the same time.
Yeah, it's around the same time. And, Michael Mann is a good reference point for this. Obviously, we talked about that before we talked about Public Enemies, because I would say him and Walter Hill, and actually this is directly connected because it's the same DP that did 48 Hours that shot Cobra, I would say kind of created that aesthetic of neon, wet streets, smoke. I'm thinking of films like Thief and 48 Hours, and then more mainstreamed through the aesthetic of Miami Vice. It was like that was the look of the 80s. And it's such a great look. Also, I'd say this film kind of really inspired Black Rain, the look of Black Rain, especially it was what I think is one of the most stylish and underrated action thrillers of the 80s. That was 89, Ridley Scott. But the opening sequences are very similar. So I think it's a very influential film as well. And of course, Drive is a huge influence, down to the toothpick and again, the sort of nihilistic but lush, dreamy LA vibes and that kind of look. So yeah, it's very in keeping with the visual brand and aesthetic of the mid 80s.
The 80s. It was great. I mean, it was like a glorious time. It's like Reagan is president. There's you have like everybody's wearing really tight fitting clothes.
Yeah.
For the most part, I guess. I mean, not everybody. David Byrne
only if
isn't.
you're a hard body.
Hard bodies are.
have a hard
Sylvester
body.
Stallone is wearing some pretty tight pants.
Wow. He sure is. Yeah. I don't know how he moves in those things.
Well, he's fit, and this is one of my favorite aspects of the movie. He's fit in part because he eats very healthy.
This is
He's
an
a healthful
important point
eater.
of the film.
The dialogue with him and his partner is it's something, man. It's something.
This I think gets to where this is basically, although yes, the director of the film is, I didn't even write his name down, but anyway, George Cosmatos or Cosmatos. But in my minimal research I did for this episode, it sounded like the actual director of the film was Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah,
And-
that's an
I mean, he
accusation
wrote the
that's
film.
been leveled against this director before. Most notably there's a long-standing controversy on Tombstone, in which he was dropped in, parachuted in, I think maybe 2 weeks before filming. It was the writer was originally going to direct it. There were problems, he fell behind. They parachuted in Cosmatos, and there's a long-standing debate as to whether Kurt Russell actually directed that film. So yeah, Sly has his hands all over this thing.
It's
right?
his-
He wrote the script. The script has a fascinating history, as you may or may not know. I don't know if you know.
Tell
about
us
what it
the
kind of-
history of the script. Yeah.
Well, it mutated out of Beverly Hills Cop. So Beverly Hills Cop, which we've covered on our other show. So I've done we have a Patreon called 48 Hours of Buddy Movies, which is all about 48 Hours' influence. And so I've done quite a lot of research about that, because that was a notoriously, what's crazy about Beverly Hills Cop is it feels like it's such a perfect vehicle, like it fits like a glove for Eddie Murphy, but actually it had this crazy, messy, tortured history. You'd never know it by the finished product because it's so perfect and clean and it just all clicks. But there were all kinds of other iterations of that movie. As it pertains to this one, at one stage, the character of Axel Foley was called Axel Cabretti, and it was Stallone was going to do it for Paramount, and but he wanted to make it more of a straight action film, and put in all these crazy action sequences because he knew he couldn't really do. Even though I think Sly it can be quite witty, like you guys talked about with Demolition Man. He does have some comedic sensibilities, but he just sort of he's not Eddie Murphy, right? So a different kind of movie. So he's like, well, I'm an action guy. That's what I'm known for. That's my brand. So I'm going to take it in this direction. And Paramount were basically like, no. That's not what we're doing here. So that fell off. And then he essentially took a lot of the ideas that he wanted to do with that project and recycled them into this. And it became its own entity, but it's also weirdly based on this book by Paula Gosling that was called something else and then was changed to Fair Game, which was also made as another movie, which is really terrible with Cindy Crawford and William Baldwin. But so it's a bit of a mess. But essentially, this is Sly's vision, and I think what I would say about him and his performance in this film and stuff is like, it's not great acting, but it's great movie starring.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like movie starring as a verb.
Yeah.
He has a great understanding of what his fans want from him. And he kind of is a bit of an icon builder. Rocky is an icon. Rambo is an icon. Cobra is an icon. He kind of knows, he's like, I know what my audience want, right? And they don't really give a shit about the logic.
Yeah, realism.
They don't really care about realism or anything. They want to see a sort of mythic hero
Yes.
kick ass.
Yes.
Yep.
I'm going to give it to them.
Yes.
Here you go. I'm like, great, thanks. I appreciate it.
I think that is exactly right. But I think it's also, interesting that he's infusing a lot of himself in this movie in a lot of ways. I mean, presumably in the politics, which we should talk about, but then also like the tone of the film, which feels crazily disjointed to me. Like at the one hand, there's like this serial killer's plot line, which is kind of the main through line. Then there's Cobra. I mean, and that's all like, in principle, extremely scary. There's a serial killer out. Maybe now it's a cult group serial killer. But then they, as we were just joking, like these guys actually just hang out together and bang axes together in a warehouse. And one of them is wearing a full like business suit. Like it's like, what is going on? But then also just like the film is sort of, I can't tell if it's tongue in cheek about some of what it's doing, but like his introductory speech is, in America, there's a burglary every 11 seconds.
Do you mean the Republican campaign ad that starts the film?
Yeah, exactly. It's like a violent crime every 25 seconds, 250 rapes a day. It's like one of these things where you're like, this can't be true.
Vote Reagan Bush, 88.
I know.
You may as well say that at the end.
Right? But I think like other films have like taken up this thing more self-consciously. Like
what was the Gerard Butler movie that starts exactly the same way?
The Town starts this way,
yes,
where the town is like, there's like Charlestown.
Charlestown's the burglary capital of the United States.
Yeah, it's like every 5 minutes a bank is
Den of
robbed.
Thieves does it too.
Den of
Den of
Thieves,
Thieves,
yeah,
that's what I was thinking of, where they give like some like ludicrously false stats for LA.
Anyway, but I think it's funny. I'm not sure if that is like intended to be funny or intended to be just like, no, this is an LA that's so
we need Cobra.
It's apocalyptic, isn't it? Almost, right? Yeah, I mean, maybe that leads us into the, conversation more on the political lines if you want to have it, because it's such a reactionary film, and it's also derived from it's Sly's take on Dirty Harry, right? Which was a notoriously crypto-fascist icon, right? And even down to the fact that two of the actors in the movie are in Dirty Harry. Andrew Robinson, who played the killer in the Scorpio Killer, heavily based on the Zodiac Killer, plays Monty, and Rennie Santori is also Dirty Harry's partner. So he's not hiding it, right? It's like, this is my spin on that type of character. So I think it's basically trying to create a pretext for like crime is so out of control that we need a guy who is unencumbered by, for want of a better phrase, liberal pussies holding him back. What I find fascinating about the film as well is this, if we can talk about it's sort of encapsulated by what the reporter says after the supermarket scene, because the reporter is hectoring him because Cobra took this guy out, right? Killed the supermarket killer who had murdered an innocent person, right? And the reporter's going, did he really have to die, Cobra? Did he really have to die? as if it's sort of it creates this ludicrous fantasy world where as if it's like the liberal media is encamped outside City Hall being like, serial killers have the right to kill and the fascist police should not be stopping them. It's like so hysterical, right?
Yes.
And the way that the cops as well are like everything. And by the way, every single thing that the cops say is totally illogical if you like action the lines. You know that they're just it's all just gibberish. But one point they're like, well, we can't go shaking people down. We'll have internal affairs down, right down our throats. It's like this guy has killed 16 people in a month.
Yeah.
You're like, I think it's okay to to
at
go
that.
after him.
Yeah.
There are
Take a look at that.
250 rapes a day in this LA.
But it's that's the worldview that it wants you to believe.
Yes.
And the thing that makes it more complex is that it does feel a little bit, well, a lot probably aligned to Sly's own worldview.
Right. Yes. That
Which makes
seems
it complicated.
Yes. No, I love how there are effectively two villains in the film. There's the night slasher, and then there's Detective Monty, his like arch nemesis on the force, who's constantly like, second guessing him and saying like, well, I wouldn't have done it that way. Even at the very end when Cobra saves the day and he's like, well, like I wouldn't have done it that way. And you're
He's like, I might have used several fewer grenades.
It is when he busts out the grenades though. I was laughing. I was like, how does this dude just have grenades?
He's Cobra.
I think it's
That's how.
also his response to Commando as well.
I was thinking about
which
this.
was the
yes.
year before.
Yes.
All right,
they're
pretend
in
that
their-
I'm somebody who hasn't seen Commando. Just pretend.
Sort it
Commando's
out.
high body count movie with Arnold.
If you watch, this makes more sense in its own deranged way in the context that Commando came out the year before, because it's just like it's these two guys in a pissing contest. Literally, the knife is like, the knife in Rambo is like this, so the knife in this has to be bigger in this and that. And
Okay, so
in
then we
Predator
get to
and-
the giant knife with the spikes that
Yes,
we've
right.
got
Spike
in this
knife.
one.
the
Spike
mother
knife.
of all knives.
Yeah, that
Um,
knife is cool. And we see it sharpened so many times. It's so sharp.
But it does make no sense. Again, it's like it's not just that he's not a detective for the zombie squad. He is also a one-man army.
Yeah.
With grenades and with all of these crazy kind of kit, because that's what we need to get the job done. If the damn liberal media would get off our backs.
Yes.
The judge wasn't just like giving every killer, like letting him walk and
Letting
like
him
giving
walk.
him surprises.
Well, the thing I think is interesting is it taps into something, I don't agree with the politics of this movie, but it taps into something I think deeply primal and ingrained in all of us, which is that, which Cobra kind of gives some hint at, which is, Bridget Nielsen at one point is like Marion Cobretti. And he's like, yeah, it's my name, try, I should have had a name like Alice or something, like just joking, like, it was a stereotypically female name and it was hard growing up for him, presumably, hinting that this guy was bullied. And, we've all been in a situation where we've had to deal with bullies and that. And there is a real catharsis to watching the bully get his comeuppance, right? Having some other person beat up the bully or make fun of the bully or whatever that kind of thing is. And I think that's what this film is tapping into is it's like, look, the victims of crime feel powerless and so on, and they're looking for someone who's unfettered, by the law to just exact revenge upon them. And there's a certain catharsis to that. There's a certain like catharsis to like seeing evil be completely and utterly quashed by the same methods that the evil is using on other people, right? Like we want to see the Night Stalker has to die, and he has to die at Cobretti's hands. Like he can't just put the cuffs on him. No, he has to kill him. And I think that's the catharsis the film is sort of setting up. And I even though like I think in the real world although we aim for such catharsis, I think we can step back and be like, okay, actually, eye for an eye, whatever, that's bad. But, I think this is the fantasy world of film where we act out those kind of, or we get to act out those kind of fantasies. And so in that regard, I don't know, I can sort of forgive that aspect of the film. I sort of see it as, I don't know, just like like a cathartic gasp.
I've thoughts on that as well, and I think you're totally right. And the word that springs to mind for me is primal.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that this film, and it might seem a bit silly to say, but this did occur to me on my latest watch of it, my 147th watch of it, this year, that it does have this kind of mythic undertone in the sense, which sort of ties in with what you're saying. It's kind of like a classic, monomyth that we all understand in our collective unconscious, which is there's evil out there that's inexplicable, inhuman, can't be reasoned with or tamed in any way, which is what the Night Slasher represents. Hence, he doesn't have a name, a motive, or any dimension whatsoever by design. And in fact, Brian Thompson asked Stallone, what's my motivate? Like, what's the going on with this guy? He's like, Stallone's like, nothing. He's just evil. Right. And that frustrated Brian Thompson, who I think delivers a great performance. But it's actually not necessarily just laziness. It's actually because it's going for something more mythic. And in the end, the finale, I think by no accident, is essentially the knight going into the dark cave to slay the monster, right? It's all in the foundry. The imagery is very hellish. And at one point in his crazy monologue, the Night Slasher is going like, you want to go to hell? You want to go to hell with me? And it gets very, very intense and nightmarish. And the imagery is, classically mythic. Dante's Inferno, what have you.
True.
And he has to confront that evil and slay the dragon, essentially. So I think Stallone, people don't always give him the credit I think he deserves for understanding that these things kind of they need to resonate on a subconscious level as well as the primary level of engagement, and that's, I think, what that primal mythic underpinning, you don't necessarily consciously absorb that, but it drives this thing forward and it makes it ultimately feel like balanced and satisfying when it ends, even though the milieu is absurd.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think one thing that the film is doing, if we want to analyze it in that way, is the film is pitting these two forces against each other. The sort of force of law and order versus like the chaos of. I mean, the Night Stalker actually does have somewhat of an ideology. It's a sort of weird one, but
can we talk about the ideology?
Yeah, he says. I mean, what he says is, and I'll probably just cut this in, but he says, "We are
the hunters. We kill the weak, so the strong survive. You can't stop the new world. Your filthy society will never get rid of people like us. It's breeding them. We are the future! No!
Your history.
You could understand this to some extent as like this kind of extreme version of social Darwinism. Like he represents this an alien force that, which is effectively like survival of the fittest. And then Cobretti would, if you understand it that way, then Cobretti is like civilization, right? So he's the resisting, like he's like if the Night Stalker is the state of nature, which is just like a war of all against all, Cobretti is lawfulness, right, and order. But I think what's interesting, if you read it that way, is that then the Night Stalker also, like Cobretti has to face, in addition to a test of like physical will, he has to also face a test of whether he will give in to the Night Stalker and effectively replace the Night Stalker as the ultimate governing force, or is he going to submit to the laws of the land and be governed by the laws of the land? Because of course, if he just kills the Night Stalker in cold blood, then he's no better than the Night Stalker, right? He's just like a Night Stalker who happens to kill Night Stalkers, but that's just, it's like he should, the ultimate goal would be for like law and order to win, which is roughly like democracy. And the Night Stalker gives voice to this. He says like, you have to take me in. I have rights. The courts are civilized, but I am not. And then, so the film is like setting up this conflict. And then I think it does sort of square the circle because Stallone in that moment, he has one up on the Night Stalker. He could kill him in that moment. He doesn't because I think the evil double-crossing cop lady like comes in And then the Night Stalker is able to get the upper hand. And then effectively Cobretti is able to kill the Night Stalker basically in self-defense
versus
so you get this kind of
murdering him
versus
outright.
like cold-blooded murder.
Mhm.
So so the film is able in a way to square the circle there. But anyway, what do you think about that? Like, 'cause I think that's a way of sort of just like kind of just pushing this line of like maybe the sort of mythic sort of forces, clashing.
Yeah, a few things sort of occur to me about that I think are really interesting. One of them is the idea, and this quote had occurred to me earlier. In Training Day, there's this fantastic line, where Denzel Washington's character Alonzo says, "To protect the sheep, you gotta kill the wolf, and it takes a wolf to catch a wolf, essentially, right?"
Yeah.
I think similarly, this is this idea of the cultists' philosophy. If you actually want to take this nonsense seriously, which we should,
Absolutely.
it's why we're here, right? If you actually do take that on face value, say, okay, yes, they're basically saying that people are sheep, and that's bad for for progression or for a society because there's too much weakness. It's the wolves, the hunters. He uses that term. The hunters. We are the hunters. They're the ones that have value, and therefore there's a sort of winnowing of the field as they view it, of like sort of a cull to take humanity to a new level. And Cobra can juggle the two things, right? He can be somewhat civilized. He can operate in a civilized way, and he understands, societal appropriacy, and he's not a psychopath. But he does have in him the ability to turn a switch or turn the cap around, a la Over the Top, and switch to the killer, the wolf. And that's what that final moment is very interesting, because it is if there is a philosophical debate in the film, and I think that does go back to sort of the Dirty Harry and these sort of debates about do we need to take the leash off our law enforcement personnel to go after the really bad people? Of course, that's made in a time when I think, maybe this is another thing that's going on in the collective psyche around that time. The Zodiac killer's never caught. So there's this, the boogeyman is still out there.
Mm-hmm.
And often I find with Hollywood likes to correct things that make people uneasy.
Mm-hmm.
Like that. So Dirty Harry is a way for us to, what if you could just go and fucking get the Zodiac killer and Clint Eastwood does it? And then we can all sleep at night.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This is why we had to get Osama bin Laden, because the boogeyman was out there. And that makes us feel uncomfortable. I think it's why Hollywood tried to relitigate Vietnam so often. If there's a collective scar in the psyche, Hollywood likes to try and find a way to correct it because it makes people feel more comfortable. So I think that's sort of what my feelings would be around what it's trying to do. And then in that key moment of that philosophical debate that does go down to that mano a mano moment, he is on the verge of it. It's interesting. Would he have killed him had he not had the character of Stork not kind of intervened? Would he have killed him in cold blood? And how would we have felt about that?
I know,
So,
that's an interesting
kinda
question.
interesting.
Yeah, he does say right before the Stork or what's her name? Stock comes in to like intervene. He says, "This is where the law stops and I start."
It's a great line. It's a great line. Don't put it on a poster on your wall.
I mean, to be fair, I think it could be the tagline of the film. I mean, that's a killer tagline. But Laura, you were mentioning that, like, just on this point, like that you felt like at least early on. I mean, I don't know. Do you want to say about the whole film? But Monty, the detective, who's the person who's most giving voice to the sort of reining in of over legal overreach by these rogue renegade cops, that maybe he has some good points.
Yeah, he's got some points.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? This guy's a complete lunatic. Cobra's a lunatic.
Cobra, you were saying, like, he keeps pointing out how many people Cobra killed. So then I looked up.
How many people has Cobra killed?
So I looked up how many people Cobra kills.
How many people?
I think it's kind of funny.
More or less than the Night Slasher?
It's more. So Cobra kills more people in this film than the Night Stalker. Of course, now the Night Stalker has been hard at work prior to the start of the movie.
The Night Slasher is a good delegator.
Yeah,
I'll say
is
that,
it
you know
Night
what I mean?
Slasher? Sorry, I don't know if I have it right.
I think Night
Whatever.
Stalker is an actual serial killer.
Right.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what I'm saying. Anyway,
That's another thing, but that was a real thing that was going on in Los Angeles.
I
the night
think-
that- so
yeah.
it's similar to the Zodiac
The
thing and the Dirty Harry
70s
thing.
was like
I
a
think that's a good point.
weirdly prolific time for serial killers.
Sure.
Like I think, so yeah, I think you're right. This is like something that we're all very collectively anxious about.
all right, here's the numbers.
Give me the numbers.
Cobra kills 42 people in the film. Night Slasher kills 33. So I found this out. Laura mentioned this. I was like, I gotta look this up. If you go to listofdeaths.fandom.wiki, you can get the list of deaths for I
the
think many
stats.
films
Okay, so we're
And-
talking during the runtime of
during the
Cobra.
runtime of the film.
Okay,
Now,
because there's also like I feel like Monty keeps being like, yeah, like those 30 people you killed last year.
sure, okay,
You know,
well,
he's
no, it's
meant,
not
like,
counting that. It's
I'm
on-screen
like,
deaths.
how many people has he killed?
My favorite thing about this, though, when you go to this wiki site, it lists the Night Slasher, like it's like, it's totaling up the kills. It's like Cobra, 42, Night Slasher.
Itemizing them, yeah.
Yeah, Night Slasher, parentheses, deceased.
Pour one out.
I
Pour
know.
one out for the Night
Poor
Slasher.
dude's gone.
Always in our hearts.
He's
Oh my God,
vanquished.
that's so funny.
I was hanging out with some 6-year-olds and they don't say killed, by the way. That he says
say
oofed.
passed?
He said oofed. He oofed him.
Is this like
So-
some Gen
Their
Alpha
light was
stuff?
extinguished.
I don't think it's a Gen Alpha thing. I think it's just that his mom didn't want him to say kill, so he says oofed
It's going to be
instead.
Gen Alpha soon.
Anyway,
It's cute.
so he oofed 40. How many people? 47.
42.
42.
42.
They're both maniacs
Yeah.
in their own way. But it does also speak to, I think, what Stallone realized again. If you look at like Commando, Stallone sort of saying, well, if I'm just a cop, Dirty Harry. The frustrating thing for Dirty Harry is there's just one killer. I could only kill him once. Cobra's like, what if there's 40?
There's an army, right?
And I can just kill people constantly.
What if I could somehow have grenades?
Where they're like, when they're in their office and they're just like, yeah, we can't figure. There's like 16 murders in a month, and they're all all the victims are different. There's no methodology, and so it's just like, what if it was different people? And they're like, shut up, no way.
yeah.
Like,
Well, this
it's
army theory sounds
preposterous.
weak.
Yeah, it sounds weak. Yeah.
He's
Okay.
him and the captain are the absolute worst.
Oh, I know.
Everything they
way-
say is gibberish. That is
Those guys, you do want to punch them. And I think, we get
the
that
end as well.
catharsis as well, where, he's just like,
yeah.
hold on, Monty. And then he just punches him in the face. Like, I mean,
it's just wild to me that Monty was the Scorpio killer in Dirty Harry. Because he has that look
So-
as well.
yes.
You know?
So so in my, I glanced at IMDb trivia. Now, Phil, you know better than me, so tell me. But I had read that there was an extended cut of this film that was like an X-rated cut. There was more violence. But apparently in the X-rated cut, which would have been, I guess, in the original script, Monty is the actual leader of the night cult or whatever they're called.
He was going to be involved in the cult for
Yeah.
sure.
Instead, was there not like a stock character instead?
I don't know. This
oh man,
the long cut is somewhat mythical. Like it's never, no one really knows. And how much of that was like a development idea, how much of it was actually shot. It's a little bit lost to time.
Okay.
I would love to know, and if that was actually ever shot, but it was certainly explored, and it kind of makes more sense in some ways that he's trying to constantly thwart the investigation if he had something in on it, but maybe they just decided to pivot it to it'd be a bit weird if there's two cops in on it.
Yeah. And I like,
I think that's
I like
over-egging the
Stalk,
little too
by
much.
the way. I like her. I think she looks deranged in a really fun way. Like the first scene where she was like,
You like her look or you like her as a character?
I like her look.
Okay.
That's the same thing for me. I feel like the first scene where you see her and she says, "Have you been drinking?" And she goes, "Yes." She's scary.
You
Stalk
enjoyed
is scary.
Stork's.
Yeah, and then she has that conversation with him while he's like shaving. She's like, "You got to kill this guy." Like she's super scary. I think she's kind of like the mastermind.
I
behind the
was
whole
wondering
thing.
to what extent, they were intimating that she's actually the real
Yeah, he's just the
It's a
psycho,
little
and
bit
she's kind of like
Lady
pulling the
Macbeth.
strings.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that scene where she's standing behind him in the mirror is like very unsettling. I thought she wasn't on screen a lot, but when she did, she had my attention.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, she had the feathered hair or whatever. She was ready to go. The other thing about this film that I think is kind of incongruous in its tone, just to come back to that slightly, just is the soundtrack. I mean, so Phil, where are you on the soundtrack of this film? Are you like, I'm listening to it all the time, or
in your car?
And I'm not joking. I own it on CD.
Sure.
I used to have a car that had a CD player, so I would be listening to.
I remember those days.
A lot.
Yes. It is good like
soundtracks-
driving music when you're just working too hard.
Especially that
You're
last.
Ubering.
The other thing that's crazy is how the film ends. This is something we talked about. If you get your last needle drop right, you're essentially kind of bottling the mood that you want people to have as they walk to their cars. And then if they feel good, they're going to tell other people, oh, that movie was great.
Yep.
So it's wild that the movie ends with like this absolutely horrific sequence where the night slasher is impaled on a giant hook in a deeply hellish environment. And then he's like, all right, bitches, I'm out. And then this sort of sub-Springsteen track kicks in, and he rides off into the sunset with,
it's called The Voice
Love's
of
Young Dream,
with
basically.
Ingrid.
The Voice of
Bridget.
America's Sons. That's the track. John
Wow.
Cafferty.
Wow.
The whole thing is very, if you're being kind, you say eclectic.
Yeah,
If
it's
you're being
eclectic.
unkind, you
Well,
say tonally disjointed.
Totally, exactly. That's
You know?
well. I mean, that's the thing is that's where the tonal disjointedness is. Like, there's the Night Stalker. They're very scary. This
Yes.
new world order or whatever.
They
But
are
then
scary.
It's like
Legit.
now we have
Yeah.
a sequence where Stallone is going around like doing police work, and it's set to Suave by Miami Sound Machine, where the lyrics are working too hard, trying to make a living, hustling all day.
I'm there.
I've had all that I can take, got to get away, I'm reaching my limit. I mean, this is like just, it's just so on the nose. I mean, the other one that I love is The Angel of the City, which is that the track she's dancing
That's
to?
amazing.
Where
Yeah.
it's like working your fingers to the bone. It's always like I'm working so hard trying to get blood from a stone.
Sweat
I'm like,
pouring
what is
down.
going on with this? Like, they're just like,
I actually saw that guy perform it live.
What?
Robert Tepper. They did this night in Hollywood. I think it was like Whiskey a Go Go or one of the sort of feted, Hollywood live music venues. And they did this night. It was Stan Bush, another 80s legend who wrote the touch that for the Transformers the movie that was supposed to be in this movie.
Yes.
And Robert Tepper was the headliner, who also did the amazing song from Rocky IV that he plays while he's driving the Lamborghini after Apollo has died.
okay.
And it was.
I haven't
it
got
was
that deep in the
fantastic.
series.
Fantastic. You have to remember as well. This is also the era of MTV, right?
Yeah, it feels very
the
music
eclectic
video.
nature and the music video-y nature of some of those sequences is again part of the aesthetic and the sensibilities of the era.
Speaking of Angel of the City, excuse me. So we sometimes do this thing called Fitz and Frizz Corner here, where Laura breaks down some of the fashionable moves in the film, and you put together, Laura, a PowerPoint for us. I'm going to share the screen now so Phil can
It's
see
a Google
I am
Slides. Nobody gets too
living
excited
for this.
I'm so sorry,
I'm
Phil.
so
that like,
pumped for this.
if I
This
were
is big.
classy and hadn't thought of this 20 minutes before this, I wouldn't have just pulled them off of YouTube all grainy like. But
no, I love this. I love it.
Allow. Okay, can you see
All right.
that, Phil?
all right, so
I can.
All right,
I
so
think the whole sequence is like a minute and a half of her, like it's intercut with Sly, but she gets 6 looks.
six
in
looks.
here.
Okay.
And of course she's being photographed with the robots.
The robots are there the whole time. Very confusing.
Different robots for different setups. This one, the first look, I'm just curious if you guys have a favorite. I call this one 80s classy sassafrasy. It's
Yeah,
good for
okay.
like,
Yeah,
you're going to work
going
and
to
you
work,
got your
yeah.
blazer,
Yeah.
but you're not wearing a bra because you're also going to go on a date later. So you've got
Love it.
it's a white suit with a deep V and you got to like slick back your hair.
Yes.
Like you got to have it like
I'm going
a
to
lot
write
of
these
gel.
down so I can vote.
Okay.
Okay,
From an
80s.
informed standpoint. 80s classy, sassafras.
Sassafrasy.
All
Okay.
right.
All right. So that's number one. All
All
right.
right.
Number two here.
is called, I call this Platinum Punk Elvira.
Okay.
She's got, I don't even know what to call this kind of hair. It was a thing in the 80s.
It feels like
looks
Debbie Harry.
it's sort of Debbie Harry, but I looked up Debbie Harry and it's not quite Debbie Harry, but it's like it looks like she has a mullet, but then she put her finger in an electric socket. And then it's like real straight and like
Careful
fly
around
away
them
at the
robots.
top.
Yeah.
At this point, it's also like, oh, she's wearing a wig in all of these looks.
Yeah.
And then again, a black blazer. And at first I thought it was just a black blazer, but then you realize that it's got like some lace details that are kind of hanging from her sleeves.
So like what is it called? Frill or whatever?
It's just like a lace detail. It looks like it's like 2 layers of sleeve, but it's got enough hang that it's sort of bat-like, which is what gave me that, and the makeup I think adds to the Elvira
Yeah,
vibe.
I see what you mean.
And and then she's got some big jewelry.
I did notice. So what's going on with her necklace here? Is this?
I don't know exactly what to call that, to be honest. I'm not a jewelry expert, but she looks fantastic. Here we go for number
2,
3.
Platinum Punk Elvira. Here's number
Correct.
3.
Cotton Candy Sergeant Peppa.
Oof.
So this one, she's got a pale pink lob with bangs. Also a wig, obviously. And then sort of like
it's a good name.
First,
it's like Paisley almost.
Yeah, like it's a long coat, duster length coat, and it looks like it's embroidered / beaded. And the design's paisley and some botanical details. I would say with like some leaves. Well, it feels like if she gets caught on something, there's going to be like 100,000 beads on the floor immediately.
And she's here interacting with the robot, so for the first time, it seems.
It depends. I've been photoshopped. I've been trying to get the picture so you can get the most outfit.
Oh, okay. So she's been like humping the robots. She's been leaning
on a lot of robots.
Okay, I see. All right, Cotton Candy, Sergeant Pepper. Here's the next one.
Sergeant Peppa. So you're like, I got the progress.
This
bar
one I couldn't
on my
crack. I gotta say.
Yeah.
What'd you say? Sorry, what was that, Phil?
This one I couldn't crack.
Yeah, what is
the headgear aspect?
Yeah,
was
I tried to look up what it was called, and all I found was fortune teller turban.
I mean, fortune teller.
It's a turban.
Yeah.
It's a headscarf fortune teller turban. I think those were quite big in the 20s.
So what is the name of this one, Laura?
I'm calling that clairvoyant LBD.
What is LBD?
It's called little black dress.
Oh, okay.
Obviously.
Sorry, I don't know.
This is her little LBD. You got to have an LBD in your closet. It's a workhorse garment. So her LBD has a high neck because this is, it's either like a very deep V or a very high neck.
Yeah.
And then she's got a headscarf in the style of a fortune teller turban.
Yep, all right.
And some enormous gemstone earrings, which we can't see in this picture, but they are quite large. And, she's ready to go to a tarot reading at any point.
To point out, the canted angle is extreme here.
Yes.
It's like...
We'll see some more canted angles, don't you worry.
It is like thoroughly like 45 degrees.
Well, we know that photographer is excellent. So he's top of his field.
The guy who's eventually going to proposition her?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
He's really good.
Okay,
he's
here
really
we go.
Talented.
Number 5.
I call this Motley Crew athleisure.
Okay.
It mostly due to her spiked up black hair now with an orange scarf. And you might think like, is something happening all around her neck? It's just a very voluminous headscarf around her hair and down her neck that as she moves, you can kind of see. And it looks like everything is made from the same black and orange graphic print material that maybe looks like tracksuit material. It's got a sheen, windbreaker material. Mm-hmm. You imagine that when she walks, she swishes a lot.
No, this is a really good, I think of the names you've given. I mean, they're all good, but this is like, this perfectly encapsulates what this is. Motley Crue athleisure. Okay. And then the last one.
I'm going to call this Buns of Steel Angel of the City.
Yep.
It's a classic leotard. You can't be in 1986 and not rock a leotard at some point. Now, it's important to notice that, like, it's hard to see. If you saw a straight on one, you'd notice how high those leg cuts are. She's going to need a wax from like tip to tail to be in this outfit for sure. And DP really, basically there's no side to this thing at all, which is impressive. And she's showing off the buns of steel in this scene. She's got maybe her natural hair. It's very permed, which I love. And then a headband that goes across the forehead.
What's that thing you have circled there in the image?
I was just pointing out that at this point, the robot companion, his eyes are lit up and he's also wearing a fur coat, complete with an animal head. Maybe it's a fox head. I'm not really sure, but there is, that thing where like sometimes ladies wear fancy fur coats that have the carcass of the animal's face still on it.
Yeah.
This is what that robot is rocking.
Phil, of the 6 here, what did you have a favorite?
I think I'd probably have to go with Cotton Candy Sergeant Pepper.
Okay.
Cotton Candy Sergeant Pepper. Let's go back to that one. There it is.
I think the pink wig, the bangs and the pink wig, it's just... I mean, it's just a smoking hot look.
She looks
I would
good.
love to. I would love to
wear
talk
this
a bit
out of all of
about.
them.
Bridget and the romantic subplot. I don't know if that's on the
let's,
docket.
let's
I would
do
love
it.
to.
Yeah,
Wait,
launch into
Justin,
it.
did you have a favorite?
do I have a
Yours is
favorite?
Motley Crew?
I think the name just like nailed it. The Motley Crue athleisure for me was killer.
Okay.
So yeah, that was my favorite.
All
Do you
right,
have a favorite,
cool,
Laura?
cool. I like the pink wig a lot. Like, I feel like the other thing that I thought about
Sorry,
calling
what's
it was
which is the pink wig?
Sergeant Peppa.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I think I also feel like she looks like a time traveling Gwen Stefani. Like she like went back to
Yes,
86.
Very good. So
right.
wait, Phil, you wanted to comment
Let's talk
on
about
the
Bridget.
romantic
Their love.
subplot.
Ingrid's love.
Bridget Nielsen gets a lot of stick, and I actually think she's great in this. I really think in the scenes where she's like being terrorized, I think she's really like excellent, totally believable, and her horror of like, why are you she gets really upset. She's like, why are you doing this to me and stuff. I feel it feels very real, and I also think there's a little bit of tends to be a slightly racist is the wrong term, but it's sort of like English isn't her natural, isn't her first language. So how about you go and do that scene in Danish and see how good you do? Do you know what I mean? We're always like, oh, Arnold Schwarzenegger, what a clown with his accent. Or Van Damme, what a clown. You're like, go and do it in Belgian or Austrian.
Yeah.
And see how nuanced and perfect you do it.
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? There tends to be this weird, slightly sneery and I think very unfair attitude towards European actors. I think she's great in this. And I find one of the rewatchable aspects for me of this is I really like the road trip section of the film. I find that quite fun.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, cool, right? The music kicks in. Right, all right, we're all going on a road trip up north. And then they go to the sort of that diner, and the romance is quite like charming in a way.
He brings her the giant hamburger.
That bit's bizarre. Yeah, he's obviously
like,
doing some
"You're
weird ad libs. I also want to give a big shout out to the granny selling the tat in that little shop.
Yes.
There. The little plastic diners.
No
I really
sale.
feel
No
like he should have
sale.
bought something, and he's like,
you
no
gotta
sale.
buy
She's like,
something,
that's
dude.
okay. I love that granny. Shout out to her.
I like her. I know
So
she's
I enjoy
very,
that section.
Yeah,
I
easy
think
going about the whole thing.
that's another part of the movie that's incongruous, but also in a lovely, like enjoyable way. Like I love that there's this sort of kind of goofy flirtation between them about her drowning her fries in ketchup, and then we get a reverse shot to him like looking down at the fries, like what the fuck
Slightly
is going?
disgusted. But it's oddly endearing.
It is.
And it
It
has
is.
this metatextual element that they
I
were
know.
in love.
I
And,
know.
and so that there is something, I don't know, that I like about that, because there's a time, when occasionally we as a sort of society get excited about a couple, a celebrity couple. And this was like a big deal, but Bridget Nielsen and Sly, and it was very short lived, but it was like it's cool. It was like aspirational somehow.
Yeah.
So sort of seeing that this, and it all ended badly, but bottling their little moment of love, I think is quite a lovely aspect of this film in an odd way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I like how she picks him. Like he's kind of just like looking at the ground, thinking about his Cobra stuff. Got to kill the bad guy.
Think about that pizza
He's-
he cut in half.
He's socially strange. Like he is. He doesn't know how to engage. And and she's kind of just like, "What's your deal? You're kind of weird.
Yeah.
Should we make out?"
She's
he's
the
like-
aggressor.
Yeah, like
she's
he's-
the one driving it forward.
And he's like,
for
"Oh,
sure.
well, it's really hard to live with me." And she's like, "Yeah, like maybe you let me worry about that."
For sure. And I think the Marion thing is also quite a charming touch, because we peel the layers of Cobra, and we understand there's actually like more going on there than the sort of hard shell persona. So I actually find that stuff genuinely quite charming.
Nice.
That's that section of the film.
It is. I mean, it is really great. I want to ask you guys about whether, so in normally in an 80s film, when the characters hook up, they just show them going at it. This film doesn't. I actually kind
do
of
a little smoochy smooch.
Yeah, I kind of like though that there's no sex scene, even though it's totally implied that they had sex that night. But what do you guys think about that? Because this is a contentious point in today's day and age.
Is it?
Oh yeah,
I have a take on it.
no
I have a take on
sex
it
in
if you wanna
movies
hear it.
anymore, and like the Gen Zers are like, I don't like, they're like all prudish about sex. So anyway,
Really?
yeah, Phil, what do you think about the no sex scene in the film?
I mean, there's a separate conversation about the sort of the Gen Z antipathy towards sex on screen, which I have some thoughts about. But speaking to this one, I'll give you an example. Right, it again goes back to Sly knowing his audience. Right, this film is aimed at 12-year-old boys. What I would say is, when I was that age, even though it's an R, right? That's what it's aimed at.
Yeah.
It's true,
When I was that
12-year-old
age,
boys who sneak in and like feels so cool. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Otherwise, you're a moron if you think this is like cool. You're a moron like me who thinks it's cool at my age, right? But
We're all sitting here at 9 o'clock, at 10 o'clock at night talking about it.
discussing about it.
Yes,
pretty cool.
we are seriously discussing this.
We're discussing the philosophy of
That's
porn.
right, the deep.
My point is, when I was around the age when I was the target audience for this film, I remember one of my favorite films that taped off the TV was Top Gun.
Yeah.
And I would always fast forward the sex scene.
Got it. I see.
I didn't care.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, no, I want the jets and the fighting and the action and that's. So I think it's actually quite a smart choice, because he's like, my audience don't want this.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care. Just get on with the story. And a sex scene is hard to do. My other theory about good sex scenes is the best ones have to have tension and danger in them. Right? It's hard to do a romantic sex scene and make it sexy, but the film noir sex scenes where it's forbidden or it's illicit or she might kill you, like Basic Instinct, or Romeo is Bleeding, or, all of the great 80s neo-noirs of Body Heat or Postman Always Rings Twice or Against All Odds. There's an element of the forbidden or the dangerous in the sex scenes that makes it exciting. Yeah. And if it's two people having consensual sex in a pretty normal like situation, it's not actually, it's hard to make that hot. Actually.
Yeah.
Well, it also
That's
doesn't.
so funny because I like imprinted on the Top Cruise, the Top Gun sex scene. I love that sex scene.
Here's another way to maybe put maybe a similar or not the same justification for not having the sex scene in this film is that in Basic Instinct, for example, you need the sex scene because it's an integral part of the plot that they've had sex, and that's part of the danger of like she literally kills people when they're having sex. That's like part of the movie. Right. But in this film, it doesn't really matter that they had sex, that they didn't have sex. Who cares? It's not crucial to the plot at all.
It's not important, and it's not what the audience are there for.
Yeah.
And it also could get a little like when this happened with The Getaway, the remake of The Getaway, and Alec Baldwin and Kim Basinger were married at the time, and there's a sex scene. It actually made people feel uncomfortable because they were a real couple. So it's sort of there's a sort of ick factor because you feel, oh, hang on, this has crossed the line into kind of a bit voyeuristic now. And it got bashed for that. Yeah. So I think it's actually quite a shrewd choice to be like, let's just, leave it.
And the only acknowledgement that we've had about sex in this movie before this scene is like when she's being explicitly propositioned, and it's yucky.
It's
like we sort of like after that want to just be like, let Ingrid not, like leave her alone, or like let her have her own sexual choices off screen,
Well, my favorite part of that bit is that the guy,
he's so pathetic.
Yeah. Well, he's like, yeah, like we should hook up or whatever. And she's like, no. But he's like, I'm not doing this for me.
It's not for me.
I'm doing it for
it's
you.
Amazing.
Like, hold on, wait a second.
Career. I'm just thinking of you.
You could just help her career. You don't have to quid pro quo this. But anyway, I love that. He's like, no, that's the way it works. You have to first have sex with me.
And
I don't really want to have to do it
as well, isn't she? She's sort of like she's quite skillful.
I mean, it was the 80s.
Laughs it off.
I mean, it was the 80s. I think it was like pretty, you had to deal with shit like this all the time. So women had a lot of like strategies for, this guy did hold, presumably he holds her career in his hands. So she's got to be tactful about how she declines his advances. But I just love that this guy's just like, I really don't want to have sex with you, but like it's kind of the rules.
Like I
can't give you a promotion.
If anything, it's an inconvenience for me.
We'll be quick, okay? It'll be quick, I promise. I don't know. To what extent is this like Stallone like writing this stuff into the film because he's just like, no, man, he can't have sex with my wife or whatever. His like, this guy's got to be an asshole. I love it so much. This film is so ridiculous. And the fact, I just want to bring back to that thing. The fact that it's ridiculous, but in a way that feels so revealing of Stallone's personality and his sensibilities. I think it's just what makes it endearing.
That's a great point, because I think he is like a man of many faces and a man of many talents. And he's kind of like, remember Nick DeSemlian, who wrote this great book about him called The Last Action Heroes, or about all of those guys. I think he did our Demolition Man episode, and he talked about Stallone because he'd interviewed him a lot, and he said, he really does contain multitudes. He's all these different things. I think, poet, painter, writer, very cultured, very unlike the persona that he is on screen, which is perceived as sort of a monosyllabic thug, which are a lot of the characters that he plays. And in real life, he's complete opposite: erudite, educated, very thoughtful, quite sophisticated in his tastes in things. And I think there was one of the things on the Wikipedia was talking about how there was a lot of problems with him, like, his egotism on the film. But and he fell out. There was an issue with him and the director of photography. They were arguing because he basically was telling the cinematographer, "You're going too slow," and he said, "Well, the reason I'm going too slow is because you're too busy, like, showing off for your bodyguards and disappearing in the trailer with Bridget Nielsen or whatever, right?" So and he was like, "Okay, I'll fair cop. I'll change my ways." But what he said was, even though he had a massive ego, he was still like really funny and had a great sense of humor. And I think he has a great sense of humor about himself.
Yeah, I get that sense.
Hence puncturing the pomposity of by having him be called a Marion.
Yeah.
And seeing this slightly gentler side to him that's also his personal life. That's his wife, right? Like, it's quite personal. And then there's sort of these slightly wackier bits. And you do sort of get to see a bit of the mosaic that is Stallone in all its sort of eccentricity and beauty and wonder in this film. It kind of contains all of that in an odd way. And they're all sort of firing off in different directions, but there's like, I mean, you have to say, like, you can say what you like, right? But when he gets out that car, that is a fucking movie star.
Yeah, he looks great.
The way he holds the screen.
He looks great.
Right? He looks awesome. He can do nothing and look cool. And not many people can, it's an easy thing to underestimate, but 99 out of 100 people or more, you ask them to do that, it won't have the magnetism that he had. He is a great movie star, no matter what. And he knows how the camera, he knows how to use the camera to as his sort of weapon of choice.
Yeah, I think that's all right. I think that's what makes the film to me endearing, is that it's so infused with his sort of strange sensibilities. He's also clearly a movie star and can hold the gaze, but he's also goofy. He's kind of a goofy guy, and that humor is there, and it stays in the film. Maybe the burger thing was ad-libbed, but it's in the film, and it's just lovely that stuff is in there. Those little things. And also, like, we've been talking about this, like the Night Stalkers clanging the axes, like that stuff's just goofy. And I love that it's in there, and it just feels like it's coming from, a person who's making these kind of silly, in a way, choices, but it's coherent.
It's authentic to him.
It's authentic because it's coherent, because it's authentic. Seems authentic to this person. Like, he's like, yeah, that's what I think would be kind of cool looking. And
I want to be on record and say I'm a if it's not obvious, I'm a huge Stallone fan. And not just like in a slightly ironic way. I genuinely think he is, when he's on form, he's absolutely brilliant. I mean, if you watch Copland and you don't say, this guy's an unbelievable actor, I don't know what movie you're watching, and First Blood and all, most of the Rockies and stuff, but I genuinely think he's brilliant. And yes, this is a sort of goofy, weird cocktail of craziness, but damn, it tastes good.
Yeah. I mean, Laura, I'm curious, Laura, if you want to just mention anything about your relationships with Stallone now, because I mean, we did Demolition Man,
Yeah.
and then you were like, I don't know, I'm not sure if I'm sold on this guy.
No, I was
And
most
then-
definitely not sold on him.
And then
we had seen Rocky.
Yeah, where are you at with that? I listened to that episode and I was curious. I was worried because I thought, okay, you're not. This is going to be hard because you're bumping against.
I have a hard sell on this, I would say.
But the progression has taken root a little bit, because then
good.
in anticipation of this, we watched Rambo. We watched First Blood.
Rambo
because
was
you had
the
never
turn,
seen
yeah,
Rambo.
for
You had
me.
never seen
Yeah.
First Blood.
No, I have not.
What did you think of it?
Okay. Well, I should preface this, but should I say this? I don't know.
You
Cut
were
it if I
asleep?
should. No, I was really high, Justin. You gave me too much edible.
Sorry.
Anyway, so I'm sort of like, where am I at every point? But I thought, I have not having know nothing about Rambo. I thought it takes place in Vietnam. So I was very confused for like the first 30 minutes. I was like, when is he going to get called back to Vietnam? Like, I'm like, what are we doing here in this suburb here? But then like, when we get to the scene where he's having his breakdown and he's talking about his experiences, that was when I was like, oh, now I understand what the difference is. Because before, all those guys that are in like the red, whatever, what's it called? Like all of the action heroes are the same to me. Because I had
Schwarzenegger, Stallone, Van Damme, Seagal, whatever. You were just
all of them.
They're
like one mono entity in my mind because I didn't watch any of them as a kid, and I was just like I couldn't tell you who was in what.
But now
that I've watched a certain amount of Schwarzenegger and I've watched a lot of Stallone, not a lot of Stallone, a few Stallone, I was like, oh, he's like the vulnerable one. He's the one who like wants to show you his weaknesses and his hurt and his. It's like Schwarzenegger would never do a scene where he's just like crying on the floor talking about his friend and pieces all over his body. He wouldn't do that. Like if he's crying, it's for comedy or something. You know, like it's not like he doesn't. I feel like you never see the veneer doesn't crack for Schwarzenegger. And Stallone always wants you to he wants to crack in there to get to his doughy insides.
Totally on the money, I think. And they even talked about that. They were smart enough to sort of slightly carve out slightly different lanes, even though they were somewhat competing. But yes, Stallone was always the one that would take a ton of punishment, and whereas Arnold was the Übermensch, was indestructible. But Stallone, was he's actually, yes, he's a great action hero, but I think he's also does have that. Fundamentally, he's a real artist and thespian. And that scene that you're talking about in First Blood, I mean, that is extraordinary stuff. Where he has his like all his disjointed PTSD is all sort of stuck together in his brain, and it all just comes out. And he wrote a lot of that. And he said on the commentary of that, he talks about how some of it came from, real people he would speak to and veterans. And he just kind of, in his mind, it was like it was all just jumbled together in the guy's head. And it's incredibly moving and truly like, I'm thinking how hard that is to do as an actor. That's why I just feel, it frustrates me sometimes because I just feel like sometimes they don't get enough respect or they're not understood. Him and Arnold are both genius level intellects. They just know there's a disparity between who they are and how they read on screen. So they lean into it, So I love these guys. And Bruce as well, of course. Bruce had his, also did something different as well. And at the end of that era, and created a new model as well and carved his own lane,
Yeah. Well, Destiny, do you feel proud that you're now helping me understand to use a word Phil already used, the mosaic of action heroes and action actors and actresses that I previously just considered one big block.
This podcast is a way, if nothing else,
to
for
force
Laura
me to watch movies I don't want to watch.
For you to gain a somewhat of an appreciation, at least for some of these action heroes, and for me, I'll use myself here. To gain a better appreciation of some of, like we did a bunch of the Sofia Coppola ones where you were sort of doing the same thing to me, like helping me see some of the things that I wasn't seeing. And so anyway, I think it's a lovely thing. We're all learning from one another and coming to better appreciate the broader mosaic, including the Stallone mosaic.
I don't think I've ever come away from a conversation that we've had on our podcast not having a better, not liking the movie more. I think I always, to put it in not a double negative, I think I always like the movie more after our conversation.
But where have you landed with this one?
Yeah, where are you on?
Okay,
5-star rating. Where are we going?
Oh, I don't know. 3.
3? That's good.
Is that
That's
fine?
solid.
Is
That's
that fine?
solid. That's
this
above
is just
average.
like not usually my speed. But we've been joking about it for 3 days now. Like it's been, and
Yeah.
it's definitely been in my mind. I think it's not my favorite Stallone movie that I've watched so far,
Right.
but I enjoyed it.
So Phil, tell us your final verdict on Cobra. Is this a 5-star movie for you, or is this your favorite Stallone?
Great question. I mean, what occurs to me on that is sort of like, I think the cardinal sin with movies is being boring.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind if a movie
That's right.
doesn't make sense or is in poor taste or is stupid or even has reprehensible politics.
Yep.
You know, Liam, my co-host on Die Hard on a Blank, has used this phrase that I think encapsulates this, and it's almost something now we want to put on a t-shirt. And I have to give him the credit. It's morally repugnant fist-pumping action. Right? That's
I
what
like
this
that.
film is to me. It's hard, you know, it almost feels arbitrary to apply like a star rating to it,
Sure.
because for me it's like a 5-star film, but by any sort of critical yardstick it's like a 1-star film.
Yeah, but whatever. But
You know,
for you, it's a 5.
But for
That's
me,
the important thing.
for me, it's right up there. Is it my favorite Stallone? I don't know. I mean, of his ones that are like his vehicles, you know, that were like, this is a movie star vehicle. It's certainly up there. But I love, and I'm interested if you'll ever watch this one. We're about to cover it. Tango and Cash, because it's him and Kurt. You know, it's him and Kurt
love Kurt.
Russell, and they are dynamite together. So I love that one. I think First Blood is one of my all-time favorites, but I think his actual best ever acting performance, I think his incredibly courageous performance is in Copland.
Okay.
So
All right, we'll have to see Copland.
2 cents
Tango and
on that.
Cash, is it like comedy action? Is it because it's like,
Yes.
is it a buddy? Okay.
Yeah. It's
Okay,
a
that
buddy
would
cop,
be interesting.
Buddy cop comedy, action comedy.
Because I really
they're two mismatched
enjoyed
cops.
Demolition Man and how he used, I mean, I think he knows, I don't know how he is in person, but on camera, he is a movie star. He's also pretty wooden though. Like that's sort of his persona, is that he's like a little bit stiff.
In that movie, for sure. Yeah.
In that movie, in all movies, he's a little bit stiff. Like, and that often I think is like the comedy that he kind of plums. Like the scene where like when Ingrid says, "Do you ever get involved?" and he's like, "With women," you know, he's, you know, like,
No, with
he's
beanstalks. Yes, with women.
She's like, here are my boobs.
just like, for God's sake, do I have to do all this? But yeah, I think like I like how he kind of weaponizes his sort of like weapon, his wooden fish out of waterness in Demolition
Yeah,
Man. So I'd be
yeah.
curious how he plays with Kurt Russell.
Tango and Cash is interesting because he's quite relaxed in that one.
Okay.
And it's almost weirdly against type, because he's like a cop that's also a sort of stockbroker on the side and is very well dressed. But you have Kurt at like level 10 Riz, like to balance off, and they're so fun together. It's a delight, that film.
So, I mean, we've had you on already, but so the audience knows about Die Hard on a Blank, but you also now have the Patreon. So tell us, I mean, the non-Patreon podcast is Die Hard on a Blank. And then
Yes.
what is the name of the Patreon podcast? Just break it down for us.
Yeah, sure. So we have the main feed with myself and my co-host Liam Billingham is Die Hard on a Blank, which is free and readily available on any and all platforms. And what we do on that show is we start with Die Hard and we explore the legacy and influence of Die Hard across action cinema, one action movie at a time. So we go in chronological order, and then that's all of the obviously all of the Die Hard sequels, but all of the Die Hard replicators like Toy Soldiers or Under Siege or Passenger 57, and it goes on, and it spirals off into some very interesting directions. Even The Matrix, we recently did with Matt Zoller Seitz, and we've been blessed to have wonderful guests like him and like your good selves who came on for, speaking of Kurt Russell, doing Breakdown, which is another movie that's like a bit of a reach, but generally you can almost, I'm pretty rigorous about the Die Hard DNA, as we call it, and I do take it quite seriously. I want to make sure there's a genuine case for how this connects back to Die Hard in some way. But we've done about 60 movies at this point. I think the latest ones we did were Arlington Road and the classic Chill Factor, Die Hard in an ice cream truck, which was actually a really fun episode.
Did you do that one with Matt
Stroll?
with Matt
Yeah,
Stroll?
with Matt
Okay.
Stroll.
Yeah,
He
Liam
was
told me about that.
fantastic.
Oh my
He was
gosh.
absolutely fantastic. And it's his point of view connects, I think, very well to this film because you have his book being called Why It's Okay to Love Bad Movies.
Mhm.
He made this, and he made a great case for how you can enjoy a movie. You know, I talked about this on the Patreon, which I'll talk about in a sec. I don't want to go on too long, but essentially we did Red Heat, and I was saying, which is a Schwarzenegger Belushi action comedy, action movie from the 80s. And I was saying, it encapsulates what I love about cinema because you can love a movie even if the story is imperfect, but everything else around it, the vibes. In that case, it's like the music, the way it's shot, the kineticism of the movie, some of the set pieces, just the milieu, stuff shot in Russia, stuff shot in Chicago, the supporting cast, whatever. Even if the story itself doesn't always have to be perfect for you to love the movie. And it's sort of what Matt was talking about, how you can kind of, with Chill Factor, he was like, well, the story doesn't work. It doesn't work as a thriller, but what else is going on that I can dig into? I like this little motif or this little thread or this character or this dynamic. So we always try and give the films a fair shake, regardless of like critical reputation then or now. It's like, okay, you get even if it's whether it's something really heralded, Hunt for Red October or Chill Factor or Under Siege 2, well, whatever it is, we will give it a fair shake.
Yeah.
The other show, which is our Patreon, is called 48 Hours of Buddy Movies. So it's essentially the same principle, except we start with 48 Hours with the thesis that is the modern definitive buddy movie, and then explore how that formula was endlessly replicated ever since in The Lethal Weapons, in The Beverly Hills Cops, in The Bad Boys, in Rush Hour, so on, Tango and Cash, so on and so forth. So it's essentially the same kind of model. And we also have a Best Fit award. So we're on the same wavelength there.
Best Fit.
We do that too.
Hooray.
It's actually like a really fun prism through which to watch some of these older films, especially in the 80s.
Sometimes if I don't know what else to do, that's just what I'm focusing on.
Yeah.
Laura's checking the fit.
It's a really fun, we have a real good laugh with it. So that one, you can subscribe to that at www.patreon.com/48 hours of buddy movies, 48 hours of buddy movies.
Okay, check it out.
Yeah. Thank you.
Phil, thank you so much for being here and truly for forcing Laura to watch Cobra, because that's the film I love, and I got a chance to force Laura to watch it, which is great.
I thought we were doing Mannequin. What's up with that?
Laura was. We'll have you back on for Mannequin at some
Please.
point, and I'll
Okay.
have
Call
to
the
hold
Cobra.
you.
Call
to,
the Cobra. When
Okay.
you do Mannequin,
We'll
call the Cobra.
Right.
So I was like, wait a second. I thought
We'll call the tailor.
I thought we had a deal, Phil. And then Justin was like, yeah, we're doing Cobra. And I was like, wait. You traded out an Andrew McCarthy movie, and I love Andrew McCarthy for Sylvester Stallone. Like, what the hell?
Oh, please.
But next time.
Yeah, I would
Next
love
time.
to talk about that one too, if you would have.
We'll have you back for Mannequin. And as for us, we're at CalsPod on Twitter and Blue Sky and all that stuff. You can find us on the web at calspod.com and email us at calspod@gmail.com. In 2 weeks, we'll be talking to Jason Bailey about Enough Said. Jason is a recent author of a book on James Gandolfini. And so we'll be doing that. And so see you guys then in 2 weeks.